Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today we're talking about something that almost no one discusses when they're dreaming about moving to Italy. Of course, we talk about visas and buying property and renting and healthcare and finding that perfect hilltop village or seaside town. But we rarely talk about what happens 20 years later. So what happens when you're 75 or when you're 85? What happens if your spouse passes away? What happens if your children live thousands of miles away? What happens if you can no longer drive or if you need help around the house? Recently, somebody in our membership asked me these exact questions, and I realized that this is something we need to talk about. What happens if Italy becomes your forever home? Because if you're not moving to Italy for a vacation, but the rest of your life, then we need to talk about more than visas and property. We need to talk about belonging. We need to talk about community. And we need to talk about aging. And most importantly, we need to talk about building a life that still works when you're 80. So today we're going to have that conversation that almost no one wants to have. Not because aging is scary, but because planning for it will give you freedom. This episode is for anyone considering retiring in Italy, anyone already living here, and anyone wondering whether Italy can truly be home for the long haul. And by the end of today's episode, I want you to walk away with practical things that you can do right now to make sure your dream of living in Italy isn't just an exciting one today, but sustainable 20 years from now. Are you ready? Let's get started. I'm Samantha Wilson, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show for people who love Italy and are quietly trying to figure out what it would really take to build a life here. We talk honestly about the practical choices, the emotional shifts, and the parts of this journey that don't always get talked about, so that you can move forward feeling informed, grounded, and more confident. If you're somewhere between dreaming and doing, you are in exactly the right place. Now, let's get into today's show. Okay, let's start with a question that nobody wants to ask. Because people come to us and they're usually focused on just getting here. They ask questions about whether or not they qualify for the visa, where they should live, should they buy or should they rent, and healthcare. These are all very important questions. But very few people ask, what happens if I stay? You see, many of our clients are in their 50s or 60s or 70s, and this is because often this is the time of your life that you can afford to move across the country. But they aren't coming here for a short adventure. They're coming because they hope Italy will become home. And if Italy is truly going to be home, then we need to think beyond the arrival. We need to think about life 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe even 30. Because here's something very interesting. Many people assume that eventually they'll just go back home. But what I've seen over and over is that after 10 or 15 years living in Italy, many people no longer feel that their old country is actually home anymore. Italy becomes home. Their friends are here. Their routines are here. Their favorite cafe is here, and their doctor and their life basically is now in Italy. And suddenly the question changes. It's no longer, can I move to Italy? It's more, can I stay in Italy? Well, the good news is the answer is often yes, but it does require planning. Now, I think one of the biggest myths that foreigners have is that aging in Italy must somehow be harder for them because they're foreign and because they are far away from home. But in many ways, Italy is actually built around aging. We have some of the oldest populations in the world. People live a very long time here. Entire systems exist to support our older adults, but they don't always look like the systems that you're used to. The goal in Italy is usually not moving people out of their homes. The goal is actually helping them stay in their homes. And that changes everything. Because while North Americans often think first about retirement communities and assisted living facilities, Italians will think first about support at home. Which brings us to something that many foreigners have never heard of, and that is the badante. A badante is a caregiver, kind of like a home care helper, who helps older adults continue living independently. Some visit your home for a few hours a week, some come daily, some actually even live in the home, and they help with all kinds of things like shopping and cooking and cleaning, and appointments and transportation, and sometimes just companionship. And for many Italians, this is the perfect solution. But there's also other options for you. So let's talk about something a little more practical, because at this point, some of you might be thinking, okay, great, Samantha, I understand the Badante option because we have something similar, but what if I eventually need more care than that? And that's a fair question. Because one of the biggest surprises for many foreigners is discovering that Italy actually has a wide range of elder care options. The challenge isn't that the options don't exist. The challenge is understanding what they're called, how they work, and whether they exist where you choose to live. And I want you to think about elder care in Italy almost like a ladder. Most people don't jump from complete independence to a nursing home overnight. They are usually many steps in between. So the first step is always remaining fully independent. And this is where most of us hope to stay for as long as possible. Now, the second step is occasional help. Maybe someone comes in once or twice a week to assist with shopping and transportation or just running some errands for you. This may only cost a few €100 a month, depending on where you live and, of course, how much help you need. Now, the next step is part-time or a full-time badante. And this is where Italy is very different from other countries. So rather than moving somebody out of their home, the support comes to them. A live-in caregiver in Italy can cost anywhere between €1,500 and €2,500 a month, depending on, of course, the responsibilities and the location. For a lot of retirees, this is the option that allows them to remain in their home for many years longer. Otherwise, they will have to move out. So then we move into what is called assisted living. In Italy, these facilities are often called casa di riposo. These are residences that are providing meals or social activities, housekeeping, assistance with daily living, or some level of supervision. They're designed for people who are mostly independent, but maybe don't want to manage everything alone at home. Maybe they're ready to be in a place with more people as well. So depending on the facility and the location, costs can range between €1,800 on the low end to €3,500 or a little bit more per month on the higher end. Now, here's something important to understand. These facilities exist everywhere in Italy, but they're not equal. Northern regions tend to have more options, newer facilities, and larger networks, where smaller towns in the south, for example, may have fewer choices. And in some areas, there is also a waiting list, the more popular places. And this is one reason that I tell people not to wait until a crisis to start researching alternatives to your care. Then there's more advanced care facilities known as RSA, and these are designed for people who need regular nursing support or medical supervision, mobility assistance, or help really with most daily activities. Think of it closer to what you might call a nursing facility in your home country. Now, costs for these can range from €2,000 a month, €4,500 a month, or even more, depending on the level of care and whether portions of the medical costs are covered by the healthcare system here. Now, let's talk about some of the challenges aside from just a wait list for the better facilities, because there are challenges, especially for foreigners. And the first one I want to talk about is the language, because many of these facilities operate almost entirely in Italian. Now, that may not matter when you're 65, but imagine being 85, perhaps struggling with memory issues and living in an environment where you never fully learned the language. This is one reason I always encourage people to continue learning Italian, even if they think they'll never become fluent. The second challenge is geography. Now, when you arrive in Italy, maybe a charming farmhouse in the middle of nowhere is beautiful, but it may be less wonderful at 85 if you can no longer drive, and the nearest services are 45 minutes away. Now, the third challenge is, of course, availability. Good facilities are often in demand, just like in your home country. Italy has one of the oldest populations in the world, and people are living longer, so demand is growing, and the best facilities often have wait lists. So remember, plan ahead. And finally, there is an emotional challenge. Many people assume that if they ever need care, they will simply return home. But after 20 years of living in Italy, where is home exactly? And this is a question that many expats eventually wrestle with. Now, if I were planning to retire in Italy tomorrow, there's 4 things that I think I would do immediately. Not later, right now. Number 1 is about healthcare, not just what is the healthcare coverage, but what is healthcare access. So ask yourself, who would take me to the hospital if I couldn't drive? Who would help me navigate appointments if I was sick? What hospital services are in the area where I want to live? A lot of people just research the healthcare system and the costs, but very few research the actual healthcare logistics. Now, number 2, I would think about my housing. Where am I going to live? Because the house that I choose today, can you still be comfortable in that house when you're 80? The stairs that felt really charming at 60 might feel very different 20 years later, and it's not easy to sell your home later. Can a caregiver easily access your home? Can you reach a grocery store without driving? So think long-term when you are finding your home. Now, number 3, think about long-term care. Most people have a plan for healthcare, but very few have a plan for care. Who helps if you need support with daily life? What would that cost? What options exist where you plan to live? Now, the best time to answer those questions is before you need them. And then number 4 is community. Now, this may actually be the most important one because if nobody knows your name, you don't have a community, you have a location. And there's a very big difference. Community doesn't happen automatically. You build it. And you build that by going to language classes, volunteering, joining local clubs or churches or walking groups, even cooking classes. Community is also easier to build when you're 60 than when you're 80, so start early. Now, another question I get all the time is, what if my children live somewhere else? Because the idea is that traditional Italian families are all together and look after their elderly. So this question is a valid concern. But here's what I want you to think about. Many Italians today have children living in different cities or different countries, even different continents. The world has changed, and many foreigners build remarkable support systems here. Friends become family, neighbors become family, community becomes your family. No, it's not identical to having children next door, but neither is life for millions of older people all around the world. The key isn't having family nearby. The key is making sure that you're not isolated. These are very different things. If you're serious about making Italy your forever home, there's 3 documents also that you need to be thinking of, and that is a healthcare directive, a power of attorney, and also a will. I know. Not exactly the fun part about moving to Italy, but these documents become incredibly important if something happens, especially unexpectedly. You have to ask yourself, who can make decisions for you? Who can access all of your bank accounts or your other accounts in your life here? Who knows your wishes? These are conversations worth having long before they're needed. And planning isn't pessimistic. Planning is actually responsible. Now, I think the biggest takeaway from today's episode is that moving to Italy isn't simply about where you want to retire. It's about where you want to belong. Those 2 are different. The goal isn't simply getting a visa or buying a house. The goal is creating a life that you won't eventually need to escape from. A life with a support, a life with community, a life with options. A life that can grow and evolve as you do. So as I wrap up today, I want to leave you with just a few questions. If you move to Italy permanently, who would be your emergency contact? Could you afford help if you needed it? Would your home still work for you at 80? What community are you building today? And if Italy truly became home, would you be prepared to stay? Because the truth is, moving to Italy isn't just about starting a new chapter. It's about creating a life that you'll love living every step of the way, including the later chapters. And honestly, those chapters deserve just as much planning as the first ones. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started. All right, question time, my friends. Question number 1. Can I remain in Italy permanently if my spouse passes away? You actually be surprised how many times I get this question. In most cases, yes, it's okay, but it depends how you arrived and what stage of the immigration process you're in. So if you are a long-term resident, meaning you've been here after 5 years and you have permanent status, it doesn't matter if your spouse is with you or if you've arrived as a spouse of an Italian or European citizen. If you have permanent status, you're okay, you're set in stone. However, if you've arrived, let's say, on elective residency visas together and you're sharing income and your spouse passes away, you will then need to get the documentation to prove that perhaps that income that your spouse had is passed on to you so you can continue to renew your permits, meeting the financial requirements. If, on the other hand, you came because you were married to an Italian or married to a European citizen and you're on a permesso di soggiorno based on that, and your spouse passes away, you'll have to reevaluate what other permits are available for you in order to continue to stay to Italy, because the anchor that allowed you to come here is no longer there. So often we'll have to find a new pathway and reapply for a conversion of a different kind of a permit. Question number 2, what legal documents should every foreigner have in Italy, especially if they're retiring? So this is what I talked about a little bit in the podcast. The first one is a healthcare directive. This is a document that outlines your wishes regarding medical care if you become unable to communicate those wishes yourself. So if you're incapacitated, it's nice to have this done, nice to have this written in both languages that you understand for your loved ones in case something happens while you're here. So a healthcare directive, number 1. Number 2, power of attorney, of course. This allows someone that you trust to act on your behalf if you become incapacitated. These people are going to have to deal with your banks and your property and your utilities and a lot of government officials. So make sure you have that straightened out. And of course, the third is a will. Ideally, one that has been reviewed by professionals that are familiar both with Italian law as well as the laws of your home country. And most foreigners actually for their wills will dedicate or say that their holdings in their estates in Italy will be dealt with in their home country. But this is really something that you should be speaking to an Italian attorney that specializes in estate planning so that you have this settled early on before it becomes a big surprise to your family. Now, question number 3. What regions in Italy are best for retirees who might need healthcare? So there's no single perfect answer. And here's the problem, is that a lot of retirees will move to the southern part of Italy to take advantage of the flat 7% tax. But these are small areas in Italy. And typically, the reason they're offering tax incentives is to bring people and revitalize these areas. So you can't expect the same level of services there that you can say in the north. So there's a bit of a problem. It's you move to save money on taxes, but you're going to be giving up the availability of some services that you might need in the future. So again, it depends on your situation. What I really recommend is that you have a look at where it is that you want to live. Regions in the north like Lombardy and Emilia-Romagna, Veneto, and Tuscany consistently rank among the strongest healthcare regions in Italy, but it doesn't mean that there isn't good care in the south. You just have to be aware and accepting of the limitations that you might have down there. Now, what some people maybe do is move and take that 7% flat tax. Of course, it's not forever. It's only for 10 years. And then at the end of that flat tax, you're in a regular tax band anyway. And maybe at that point, it's the time of your life that you might want to move center or north to be closer to better healthcare. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you of something. You don't need all of the answers right now. You just need the right questions and the space to think clearly. If this episode helped you feel more grounded or less alone, that's exactly why the show exists. You can find all of the links and the resources that I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. And if you want to go deeper, head over to smartmoveitaly.com for more ways that we can help you make your move to Italy a whole lot easier. And if you're enjoying the show, subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone that is also dreaming about Italy helps more than you know. Thanks again for spending time with me. I will see you next week. Ciao for now.